There are lots of different ways to make half square triangles, and one way is to just cut two triangles and stitch them together along their diagonal edge. But there are a lot of methods which are far more preferable than this, and I'm going to take you through them now. To produce two identical half square triangles, you are going to cut a square which is at least 7/8 of an inch bigger than you want your finished square to be. And often it can be a good idea to make it a little bigger than that in order that you can trim it back to size. So to make two half square triangles, you're going to cut out your square and you're going to draw a line across the diagonal point. Doesn't matter which way you draw it, just across one diagonal point. And having drawn that line, you are then going to stitch a seam 1/4 of an inch away from that line on both sides. And then, quite simply, we're going to cut down that line like so, and we have a pair of matching half square triangles. So to begin with, that square was 5 inches. And if I just give this one a quick press, we have ended up with a square which is a maximum of 4 3/4, but would actually be trimmed down to a smaller size. And to trim your half square triangle, take any ruler that has a 45-degree line on it, and you can place that 45-degree line along your seam and then trim your square to the desired size. So that's the process for making two half square triangles at the same time: to cut a square, draw a diagonal, and then stitch either side of that seam. To make 4 identical half square triangles at the same time, we're going to take ourselves a square. So this square is approximately 10 inches square, so a typical layer cake size square. And then we're going to sew a seam all around the outside of this square using a 1/4 inch seam. Having stitched around all 4 sides of my 10-inch square, I'm now going to cut that square on both diagonals. If you have a rotating cutting mat, this could be a good time to use it. Otherwise, you can just rotate it really carefully yourself. Pop it back together and bisect in the other direction. So now we have 4 identical half square triangles, and if I give that a press and pop my square on top, that finished half square triangle is a 6.5 inch size. So starting with a 10-inch square, we've got a 6.5 inch half square triangle that we could trim down to whatever size we would like. So that's making 4 identical half square triangles at the same time. The point to note on this method is that this edge here and this edge here is this and this here on my cutting. So that is a bias cut half square triangle. So on a half square triangle cut using this technique 4 at a time, all of your edges that you're going to later stitch together are bias edges. And that means that they are liable to a little bit of stretch rather than a straight edge. So just something to bear in mind when using the 4 half square triangles at a time method. This method creates 8 identical half square triangles at the same time. And the maths for this one is quite straightforward. If you want your square to be, for example, 5 inches finished, you would add 7/8 on, making it 5 7/8, and then you would multiply that by 2 to work out the size of the square that you want to start with. So take your initial finished measurement, of your unfinished block, add on 7/8 of an inch, and then times it by 2 to find the final size of square you need to cut. So I'm working with a 10-inch square here for ease, and I've marked on 2 diagonal lines, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam either side of both of those diagonal seams. Okay, so we've now got something which looks like this. I'm now going to cut along both diagonal seams, and now I'm going to do the other one. Like so. And now I'm also going to cut along my straight halfway lines. So I'm measuring 5 inches up from the bottom and cutting across and going through my centre point. And now I'm going to measure 5 inches across from the side and go through my centre point. This half square triangle method, all of your edges of your finished half square triangle are on the straight, and therefore they don't stretch.